on this beautiful, if brisk morning. So thank you guys for coming out. Today's message, as you can tell, is stop that violent communication. So we are going to start by reviewing, who can tell me what is Unity's second principle? Does anyone want to tell me that? No, I don't see any hands. Okay, all right, I'll tell you. It's Unity's second principle is that every human being, without exception, has the spark of God within them and are always connected to God, and so at our deepest core, we are inherently good. Now, for those of you who didn't know the second principle, I'd just like to say that if reading joke books has taught me one thing, is that when we get to the pearly gates, there's going to be a quiz to determine if we get in or not. Pretty sure the 5 principles will be on that quiz, so I'm just saying. But if you're like me, and really no one is, but if you're like me, you may have sometimes wondered, if every person at their deepest core is inherently good, why is it that sometimes people do such not good things from time to time? I mean, just a minor example from my life. When I was in high school, after school, I was in front of the building, and a boy who was larger than me snuck up behind me and shoved me so hard that my glasses flew 10 feet through the air. And wasn't expecting that. And I know you're thinking, thank goodness Tim stopped and remembered this boy had the divine light within him and was inherently good. But actually, you're wrong. Those were not the thoughts that I were having at that moment. So, but that was absolutely nothing compared to what many people, including Marshall Rosenberg, have endured. So in the summer of 1943, when Marshall Rosenberg was a child, his family moved to Detroit, Michigan. And when he started school there, the teacher called his name during attendance, and 2 boys recognized the name Rosenberg as a Jewish name, and they called him an ethnic slur. And then after school, the 2 boys were waiting for him. They threw him to the ground and kicked and beat him. And though, of course, this was an awful experience, but I would say it inspired great things in Marshall Rosenberg, because even at that age, even as a child, he believed, much as we do in Unity today, that it is our nature, it's everyone's nature, to enjoy giving and receiving compassionately. Not just to give and receive compassionately, but also to enjoy it. So after this incident, he became preoccupied with 2 questions for the rest of his life. The first question, what happens that causes people to become disconnected from their compassionate nature? And the second question, how is it that some people are able to remain connected to their compassionate nature even in the most trying of circumstances? Because that also happens. So you could say that this was his life's work. I would say that. Finding answers, delving into these questions and these ideas. And I would say that I believe Marshall Rosenberg came up with some very deep and profound answers to these questions when he developed the system we know as nonviolent communication. Now, he's using the term nonviolent the way Gandhi used the term nonviolent. To mean, don't drop your water. No, Gandhi used the term to mean our natural state of compassion when violence has subsided from the heart. And you most likely don't think of the way that you communicate as violent. In fact, you're probably saying, just more proof that Tim is insane, right? But I'll have you know that the doctors have told me I do not suffer from insanity. I enjoy every minute of it. So, there you go. So even though we usually don't feel like the way we communicate is violent, we're in a culture where most of us, at least, have been brought up with these ways of thinking and speaking and communicating that sometimes cause pain to other people and also to ourselves. And we, of course, don't realize it. Even very well-meaning people tend to create unnecessary conflict between themselves and others, because most of us are educated from birth to compete, to pronounce judgments, and to diagnose people. So what do I mean by diagnosing? Anytime we say, so-and-so is such and such, that's probably a diagnosis. So if I say, he is picky and compulsive, I just put myself on a pedestal, looking down on his life, and pronounced him picky and compulsive. I diagnosed him. Or if someone were to say, Tim is crazy. See, that's another diagnosis that we don't need here. So even very spiritual people often have a great deal of trouble giving up judgments and diagnoses of other people. And this is largely because we're living in a culture which is based on the idea that everything we do is either right or wrong. And if we do the right thing, we deserve to be rewarded. And if we do the wrong thing, we deserve to be punished. And there's a lot of wrong things out there. So according to this viewpoint, this cultural belief, there's a lot of punishment that needs to happen. So you can begin to see why Gandhi and Marshall Rosenberg and others kind of thought of this as a violent way of thinking, even if there's no physical violence involved. And also, 75% of the television programs that play when children are most likely to be watching have at some point the hero either kills someone or beats someone up. Because even from that earliest of ages, we're trained, the hero is right and deserves good things, and the antagonist is wrong and deserves to be punished. And that's why it's so satisfying when we see the antagonist punished severely, even death. So that's a pretty severe punishment. And all of this goes along with a traditional view of human nature that's been around for centuries in Western culture. Now, this is not the same as Unity's belief, but the dominant belief for centuries has been what some people call original sin, that it stresses our innate evil and deficiency, and that we need education to control our inherently undesirable nature. So naturally, if we have this evil and this undesirable nature, that means that we probably shouldn't trust our own inner feelings, intuitions, and needs, right? Because that's coming from inside where there's the evil. But in Unity, we believe not in original sin, but in original blessing. Well, maybe not for the boy who pushed me, but for... Okay, all right, he was just caught up in a culture that promotes violence. So even he had the original blessing. And so most of us become cut off from true conscious awareness of our emotions and our needs at an early age because, after all, we're not supposed to trust those feelings, those needs, they're coming from inside. So we are to look to outside authorities, or to look outside ourselves to hear what is right and what is wrong in most all areas of our life. Authorities love this way of thinking, by the way, which is why authorities created this way of thinking many centuries ago. So, because we are not... Now, of course, at some level, we always feel what we feel, but we don't always let it come into our true conscious awareness. And because of this lack of connection with our feelings and our needs, we often tend to project our feelings and needs onto other people, which is what we do every time that we diagnose someone. We're actually not telling anything about the other person. We're telling about ourselves. So, let's say just a hypothetical situation. Okay? Suppose my partner wants more affection than I'm giving her. Then I might say that she's needy and dependent. But if, on the other hand, if I want more affection than she's giving me, then she's aloof and insensitive. So whether I diagnose her as needy and dependent or aloof and insensitive, have I really told you anything about her? Nothing. I've told you about myself and my own needs. Suppose my coworker is more concerned about details than I am. I would probably say that he is picky and compulsive. What if, oh my, there's looks going on in the crowd. What if I am more concerned about details than my coworker? Well, then he's sloppy and disorganized, right? So whether I pronounce him picky and compulsive or sloppy and disorganized, all I've really told you about is my needs and values, right? So, because of things like this, NVC trains us in other ways of thinking about ourselves and other people so that we can move away from diagnosing others in this manner. And we start by learning to make concrete observations. So, what do I mean by a concrete observation? A concrete observation is when we report exactly what we observed with our five senses with no evaluation or interpretation, and we say it in a very specific way. There are no generalizations, and there's no vague language. Vague language tends to lead to inner and outer confusion, which in turn tends to lead to conflict. So, okay, I'm going to say a sentence, and you guys tell me if this is a concrete observation or not. He frequently comes over. Is that? Actually, no. One person's frequently could be another person's seldom. If I say, over the last 2 months, he has come over at least 3 times a week. Is that a concrete observation? That is a concrete observation. If I say, Doug procrastinates, is that a concrete observation? No. I made an evaluation there, didn't I? If I say, Doug told me he only ever studies the night before an exam, is that a concrete observation? That is. You guys are getting good at this, which is good, because there's going to be a quiz at the end. No. No. All right. If I were to say, you seldom do what I want to do, is that a concrete observation? Not even close. If I say, the last 3 times I initiated an activity, you said you didn't want to do it, is that a concrete observation? That is one. Or if someone was to say, Tim is not as funny as he thinks he is. Is that a concrete observation? It certainly is not, Mark. If that someone were to say, during Tim's talk, he told 4 jokes that no one laughed at, would that be a concrete observation? Which hopefully you would make when Tim can't hear you. Okay, so as you might have noticed with some of these observations, we tend to make evaluations of all our observations, even if it's just subconsciously, and we tend to mistake the evaluation for the observation. So we need to learn to separate our observations from our evaluations. When we can do that, it will make a big change in the way that we perceive other people, in the way we perceive ourselves, and the way we communicate. So, okay. One of the things about evaluations is not only do we need to keep them separate from our observations, we need to take responsibility for them. We need to admit that we made an evaluation. We're not just stating a fact that's clear to everyone in the world. Because when would everyone in the world agree on anything? Never. So, here is a statement. Tell me if it has a concrete observation. I think you are too generous. Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of an evaluation. If I said, you are too generous, that is clearly not a concrete observation. If I said, when I see you give all of your lunch money to other people, I think you are being too generous. Well, that has a concrete observation. When I see you give all of your lunch money to other people, and it has an evaluation. I think you are being too generous. But notice I didn't say that everyone in the world would agree that you are too generous. I said, I think you are being too generous. So that allows for a lot more clarity in communication. And whenever we're in a situation where we're wanting to request something of someone, we're wanting something to be different than it is, even if we don't actually plan to request this from the other person, communication is important in these situations because there are ways to request things that are much more likely to lead to a compassionate response from the other person or people. We have a 4-step process in compassionate communication, and we start by becoming aware of what feelings and needs underlie this desire that we're having. Because sometimes we don't consciously identify our feeling, and we don't consciously identify the need that leads to the feeling. And the feeling doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from an unmet need or value. So there's a 4-step process. First step, we've covered pretty well, make a concrete observation. Second step, state the feeling that you have that relates to the concrete observation. Third step, state the need that you have that led to the feeling. Fourth step, make a request of the other person. Some of you already know this. So, I would give an example. Suppose a mother was going to use compassionate communication with her teenage son. She might say something like, Andrew, when I see 2 balls of dirty socks underneath the coffee table and another 3 next to the TV, I feel irritated because I am needing more order in the rooms we share in common. Would you be willing to put your dirty socks in the washing machine? And if she says it in this way, with all 4 components, she's more likely to get a compassionate response. So yes, it does have all 4 components. When I see 2 balls of dirty socks underneath the coffee table and another 3 next to the TV, so notice that is a concrete observation. She did not say, when I see your dirty socks all over the place, because if she said that, which was not a concrete observation, of course, Andrew's going to see that as an attack. And people who are feeling attacked do not tend to activate their compassionate nature under those circumstances. And then she said, I feel irritated. She took responsibility for her feeling. She did not say, you are so irritating. She said, I feel irritated, a true statement, because I am needing more order in the rooms that we share in common. She stated the need that led to the feeling of irritation. And fourth, she said, would you be willing to put your dirty socks in the washing machine? So, now, at first I was wondering, why do we have to go through all this rigmarole? Why doesn't she just say, would you be willing to put your dirty socks in the washing machine? But it turns out that when we make requests and we do not state the feeling and the need that leads to that request, the other person is much more likely to hear our request as a demand. Even if we didn't intend it as such, even if we had no awareness that that's how the other person perceived it, they're much more likely to hear it as a demand. And when people hear demands, they always feel resistance, they feel pain, resentment. So even if Andrew were to comply with this demand, which his mother probably didn't even realize was a demand, there would be consequences because he would carry that resentment with him and it would affect future communication. And so that's why we use the 4 steps, the 4 components. Now in Unity, we believe that the language that we speak affects both our conscious and subconscious beliefs. So a lot of us have maybe subconscious beliefs that we were raised with, that were in the culture, that we find no longer serve us, so we might use affirmations and denials to change our beliefs in certain regards. But another way that we can use language to change our subconscious and conscious beliefs is through nonviolent communication or compassionate communication, because going through the process greatly changes the way that we perceive our interactions with other people. And if we keep doing it long enough, at least, Marshall Rosenberg assures us that eventually the other person will come around and we'll see their compassionate nature be activated also. And so what a wonderful affirmation for us that, yes, everyone does have this compassionate nature within them. And so it affirms our second principle. The spark of God is within every person, all the time. And so I realize some of you may have had one or two differences with some things I said. So if that's the case, please just remember that I'm right and you're wrong. Thank you.